In the quiet village of Ajolo, where red dust curled under bare feet and goats bleated freely in the evening air, a woman named Mofola carried a secret that even the wind dared not whisper. Years ago, she had found a baby wrapped in an old cloth, left beside the yam stall after the market closed. The child was no more than a few hours old, crying, cold, and alone. Her own daughter, Remy, had just turned 1. Mofola didn't have much, but her heart was soft in those days. She picked up the crying baby, cradled her to her chest, and brought her home. She named her Ebony. But kindness, like river water, can dry up. As Remy grew into a proud and spoiled girl, Ebony became the one who scrubbed the floors, fetched the water, and cooked every meal. She was always the last to eat if there was any food left. The neighbors watched but said nothing. After all, a child that is not your blood is a child you can never truly love. Ebony, now 16, didn't complain. She believed Mofola was her real mother. She believed Remy was her sister. Even when Remy mocked her clothes or pushed her out of the way, Ebony smiled and forgave. But whispers don't stay quiet forever. One evening, as the firewood crackled and the sun sank into the hills, Ebony returned early from the stream. She was about to step into the kitchen when she heard Remy's sharp voice. "Why must she eat with us?" Remy snapped. "She's not even your real daughter." Ebony froze. "She's adopted. Everyone knows it but her," Remy continued with a bitter laugh. "She should be grateful we kept her at all. Mama, let's just send her away. She's becoming too beautiful. Soon, all the boys will chase her instead of me." Mofola sighed heavily. "You speak the truth, Remy. She was never mine. I should have left her that day." Ebony stood still. Her hands trembled. The bowl she was holding slipped and shattered on the ground. The noise made both women fall silent. From that day, everything changed. Mofola no longer bothered to pretend. She gave Ebony the hardest chores. She scolded her for every mistake, real or imagined. Remy, now 17 and admired by all the village boys, insulted Ebony without shame. Then, one morning, Mofola called her outside. "You're getting married," she said, not even looking Ebony in the eyes. Ebony blinked. "Married? To who?" "To Leke," Mofola replied sharply. "He lives by the river. The poor one with the bad leg. You know him?" Ebony's chest tightened. Everyone in the village knew Leke. He walked with a limp and lived alone in a crumbling hut. He barely spoke, barely smiled. Children laughed behind his back. Women whispered that he would never find a wife. "But, why?" Ebony asked, her voice shaking. Mofola's eyes narrowed. "Why? Because you are nothing. You have no family, no name, no worth. Be glad someone is even willing to marry you." Remy stood nearby, arms folded, smirking with satisfaction. Ebony's throat burned, but no words came out. That evening, without a single song or blessing, she was sent away. No dress, no gifts, no goodbye, just silence as she walked the dusty road toward Leke's hut. And yet, deep inside her, a strange feeling stirred. Not love. Not hope. But something quiet and strong. She would survive. The sun had already dipped behind the hills when Ebony reached Leke's hut. It stood alone near the river, surrounded by tall weeds and broken clay pots. The walls were cracked, and the roof looked like it could fall with the next strong wind. A torn curtain hung in the doorway. No one had decorated it for her arrival. No one was waiting with smiles or singing. Just silence. Leke stood outside, leaning on a crooked walking stick. His clothes were plain and worn, his sandals thin as leaves. His left leg bent awkwardly, but he held himself upright with quiet pride. "You're here," he said, his voice calm but distant. Ebony nodded, her eyes lowered. She didn't know what to say. She had imagined marriage to be a joyful thing, dancing, laughter, love. But now, all she felt was fear and shame. Leke turned and stepped into the hut. She followed. Inside, the room was small and dim. A wooden bed stood against one wall. A thin mat lay on the floor. A single stool sat near the cold fire pit. The air smelled of river mud and old smoke. "This is your home now," Leke said. Ebony looked around, her heart sinking. She didn't expect riches, but she also didn't expect this. "You can sleep there," Leke pointed to the mat. Ebony stared at him, surprised. She had heard stories of men who forced their wives on the first night. But Leke didn't touch her. He didn't even sit close. He simply lay on the bed, turned his back, and closed his eyes. Ebony curled up on the mat, her wrapper thin against the cold ground. The cracks in the wall let in the wind. Her body trembled. She clutched her arms to her chest and let the tears fall silently. For hours, she cried. Not just because of the cold or the emptiness of the room, but because of everything. The lies. The rejection. The feeling that she was nothing but a burden passed from one house to another. She cried until sleep took her like a thief in the night. The next morning, she rose early and swept the dusty floor. She cooked with the little food she found, just a handful of gari and one dry pepper. She boiled water for Leke to bathe, even though he hadn't asked. He watched her quietly but said nothing. Each day followed the same pattern. She fetched water, cleaned the hut, cooked what she could. Leke went out and returned without explanation. He spoke little, but his eyes were kind, even when his lips stayed shut. And though he had nothing to offer her, not even a single coin or comfort, he never raised his voice. Never hit her. Never called her useless. It confused her. One day, she asked, "Why did you agree to marry me?" Leke was sharpening a knife. He paused. "They said you needed a home." Ebony frowned. "But I'm just a burden." "Everyone says so." Leke looked at her for a long moment. "Then they don't know you." She blinked, stunned. No one had ever said that before. Not even in a whisper. That night, as she lay on the mat, the wind howled again. But for the first time, she didn't cry. Instead, she stared at the wooden roof and whispered to herself, "Maybe I'm not nothing after all." Days passed. Then weeks. Ebony got used to the quiet rhythm of her new life. Every morning, she woke before the sun, swept the compound, fetched water from the river, and cooked whatever little food she could find. There was never much, just cassava, pepper, or leftover dried fish from the market. She said little, and so did Leke. He went out each day with his walking stick, returning only when the sun had gone down. He never told her where he went, and she never asked. Their conversations were few, mostly about chores, food, or silence. But though he barely spoke, he never shouted. He never laid a hand on her. And somehow, that silence became more comforting than the loud hate she had known in Mofola's house. Still, the village didn't stop mocking her. At the riverbank, women laughed behind her back. "Look at her," one would say. "She used to walk like a princess. Now she carries firewood for a beggar. She married a man with one good leg and no money." TSK. Ebony kept her eyes low and said nothing. She was used to shame. It no longer burned, it just sat on her shoulders like an old cloth. Then one afternoon, everything changed. She was returning from the market, her arms full of yams, when her foot caught on a stone. The basket slipped. Yams scattered across the dirt. Laughter erupted. Ebony dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick them up. Her cheeks burned as the women nearby giggled, pointing and whispering. "Even a poor man's wife can't carry food properly," one of them sneered. Her fingers shook. She blinked fast, refusing to let the tears fall. Just as she reached for the last yam, a hand reached out before hers. She looked up. It was Leke. He said nothing as he picked up the yam and gently placed it back in the basket. Then he helped her lift it into her arms. The crowd of women went silent. Ebony stood frozen. She expected him to scold her or walk away, but instead, he looked her in the eye and said, "You don't have to carry everything alone." Then he turned and walked beside her, steady and silent. That night, Ebony sat outside the hut, staring at the stars. Her stomach growled loudly. She had eaten nothing all day. Leke came out of the hut, holding a wooden bowl. Without a word, he placed it beside her. She looked down. Inside was boiled yam with pepper sauce. She blinked. "Where did you get this?" "I bought it," he said simply. Ebony's eyes widened. "But I thought we had no money." Leke didn't answer. He only said, "Eat." "What about you?" she asked. "I already ate," he replied. But as she stared at the bowl, she saw the truth. There was only one portion. He had given her everything. Her chest tightened. Slowly, she picked up the yam and began to eat. Each bite tasted like more than food. It tasted like warmth. Like care. Like something she had never known. Kindness. When she finished, she looked at Leke. He was back inside, sitting by the firelight, sharpening his knife like always. She didn't understand him. He was poor. He was quiet. He was strange. But somehow, in that quiet night, Ebony felt something she had not felt in many years. Safe. One quiet morning, as Ebony returned from the river with a pot of water balanced on her head, she saw someone standing in front of the hut. It was Remy. Her stepsister stood tall in a bright wrapper and golden earrings that caught the sunlight. Her skin glowed with scented oils, and her eyes sparkled, not with joy, but with cruel mischief. Ebony's heart dropped. Remy didn't wait to be invited in. She walked straight into the compound like she owned it. Well, she said, glancing around. "So this is where you live now?" A broken hut for a broken girl. Ebony placed the water pot down slowly, her hand steady even though her chest felt tight. "What do you want, Remy?" she asked quietly. Remy smiled and reached into her small bag. "I brought something for you. A gift, you could say." She pulled out a gold bracelet, thin and delicate. Ebony gasped. That was her bracelet. The only thing left from her real mother. Mofola had once told her it was a useless trinket. She had hidden it under her wrapper for years, protecting it like a treasure. "How did you get that?" Ebony asked, stepping forward. "Mother found it," Remy replied sweetly. "She said you wouldn't need something this pretty now that you live like a beggar." Ebony's hands trembled. "Give it back." Remy held the bracelet high, then laughed, and before Ebony could stop her, she threw it to the ground and stomped on it. Crunch! Ebony rushed forward, pushing her aside. She bent down, her hands grabbing the bracelet from the dirt. It was bent, scratched, and muddy. "You monster," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Remy laughed. "Oh, look at you, crying over trash. You always were too soft." Before Ebony could say another word, a voice cut through the air. "Leave." It was Leke. He stood at the doorway, his eyes sharp and voice strong. Remy turned. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Leke said, stepping forward. "Take your poison and leave this place." Remy raised an eyebrow. "Do you know who I am?" "I do," he said coldly. "You are a cruel woman with a bitter heart. But not here. Not in my home." Remy's mouth fell open. She looked between Leke and Ebony, then scoffed. "Fine. Enjoy your little shack." She turned and walked away, but Ebony noticed something. For the first time, Remy had looked shaken. When she was gone, Leke walked over to Ebony and knelt beside her. He gently took the broken bracelet from her hands, wrapped it in a clean cloth, and carried it inside. He didn't say much, but Ebony could hear him at his workbench, carefully straightening the metal, wiping away the dirt. Minutes passed. Then he returned, holding the bracelet out to her. It was still scratched, still bent, but it was whole again. Ebony looked at it, then at him. Her lips trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. Leke nodded once, then returned to his corner. Ebony held the bracelet to her chest. It wasn't perfect anymore. But neither was she. And yet, someone still cared enough to fix it. That night, she didn't lie on her mat in tears. Instead, she sat by the fire, the bracelet in her hand, and whispered to herself. Maybe broken things can still be beautiful. Ever since Leke had fixed her bracelet, something inside Ebony had begun to shift. She still fetched water, cooked, and swept their little compound, but now she did it with a strange calm in her heart. She no longer felt like a burden or a castaway. And though she and Leke still barely spoke, his quiet kindness was becoming louder than words. But there were questions. Strange things began to happen. Leke, who once came home empty-handed, now brought back small surprises: fresh bread, smoked fish, a new cooking pot. Once, he even handed her a soft wrapper, bright yellow with little bluebirds on it. Ebony had stared at it for a long time. "Where did you get this?" she asked. He only shrugged. "I have my ways." The villagers noticed too. Whispers followed her wherever she walked. "Did you see her wrapper? She eats well now. Where's the money coming from? Maybe he's stealing." Ebony hated the looks, the stares, the gossip. One evening, unable to hold it in, she sat beside Leke as he trimmed firewood. "Why are people saying you have money?" she asked, watching his hands. He didn't stop walking. "People talk. But is it true?" she pushed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you not poor?" Leke looked up, his eyes steady. "Does it matter?" Ebony swallowed hard. "It does. Because I need to know who I married." He was quiet for a moment. Then, with a small smile, he said, "I'm just a man who didn't want to see his wife suffer." And with that, he stood and walked away. Ebony sat alone by the fire, her heart pounding. That night, she couldn't sleep. His words roared in her head like thunder. "I'm just a man who didn't want to see his wife suffer." The next morning, she decided to follow him. She waited until he left with his walking stick, disappearing into the trees like always. Then she trailed behind, keeping her distance. He didn't go to the river. He didn't go to the farms. He walked down a narrow hidden path, one Ebony had never noticed before. She stayed low, her heart racing. After a long walk, the trees opened up into a wide clearing. And what she saw made her breath stop. A grand gate. Tall, iron, and polished, it stood between two stone walls. Behind it, she saw a massive compound, beautiful gardens, a fountain, and a house so large it looked like a chief's palace. Leke walked through the gate. Two guards opened it with deep bows. Ebony gasped and stepped back, hidden in the bush. Her head spun. Her breath caught in her chest. What was going on? She waited until he was gone from view, then hurried home, her legs trembling beneath her. When Leke returned that evening, she was waiting for him. "Where did you go today?" she asked, standing by the door. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said softly, "You followed me." She nodded. There was no anger in his eyes. No shame. Only calm. "Then I suppose it's time you knew." Ebony stared at him. "Knew what?" He stepped closer. His voice low. That I am not the man everyone thinks I am. He paused, then added, my real name is Obololuwa. Abeni's eyes widened. He nodded. Son of the late Chief Odio. I left that life years ago to live as no one, to find someone who would love me for who I am, not what I own. Abeni's knees almost gave way. Her voice shook. And you chose me? Obololuwa smiled gently. I didn't choose you, Abeni. Life brought you to me. And you made staying worth it. The next morning, the news exploded like fire in dry grass. Did you hear? That poor crippled man, he's a chief's son. His name is Obololuwa. He owns land, businesses, even houses in the city. The whole village buzzed. Children ran through the market shouting his name. Women dropped their calabashes in shock. Men who once mocked him now stood in awe. And Abeni. She stood at the center of it all, her heart pounding. The same villagers who once laughed at her now stared in disbelief. The same women who had called her curse now whispered as she passed by, their voices shaking with envy. She married him. That girl. The adopted one. Oh. What kind of luck is that? Abeni walked quietly, head held high, not in pride, but in calm strength. She didn't say a word. Let them talk. Let them wonder. At the river, Remy appeared again. She was dressed finer than ever, her scarf wrapped high, her wrists stacked with jingling bangles, but her face was tight with jealousy. So, Remy said, forcing a smile. It's true. Your husband isn't a beggar after all. Abeni looked at her without fear. No. He never was. Remy scoffed. You think this changes anything? You're still just a girl someone picked off the street. Abeni's voice was quiet, but firm. Maybe. But someone saw my worth. That's more than you can say. Remy's face twisted, but she turned and stormed off, her bangles clanging like broken pride. Later that day, Obololuwa took Abeni to the mansion for the first time. As the gates opened before them, Abeni's breath caught. The house was even more beautiful up close, tall pillars, white steps, gardens full of flowers she had never seen before. He held her hand gently as they walked in. This is all yours, she asked. Obololuwa nodded. And now, it's yours too. Abeni touched the wall as they entered, like she was making sure it wasn't a dream. I don't understand, she whispered. Why hide this? He looked at her, his face soft. Because I was tired of being loved for what I had. I wanted to be seen. And then, I met you. She looked down, a tear slipping down her cheek. I thought I was nothing, she said. Unwanted. Unloved. He reached out and lifted her chin gently. You were never nothing. You were just placed in the wrong hands. She smiled through her tears, and for the first time, her heart felt light. That night, the sky over the village glowed brighter than usual. Some said it was just stars. But Abeni knew. It was the universe finally smiling at her. Back in Mofola's house, Remy smashed a calabash in anger. How can she be the lucky one, she screamed. She was the servant. She was nothing. Mofola sat quietly, her face pale. She had thrown Abeni away like old cloth, but now that same girl was living in a mansion. The shame was heavy. Maybe, Mofola whispered at last, we made a mistake. But it was too late. The girl they had cast aside was now standing where they had never dreamed she could reach. And the whole village was watching. The village of Ajolo had never seen anything like it. Drummers lined the paths. The air smelled of roasted meat and sweet fried plantain. Colorful fabrics danced in the breeze, tied high between trees like blessings from the sky. People gathered from far and near, not to mock, not to whisper, but to witness something unforgettable. Ebony was getting married. This time, not by force. Not in silence. But in joy and by choice. Obololiwa had proposed properly, kneeling under the moonlight, his voice trembling with love. "I want to marry you again, Ebony," he had said, "not as a stranger, not in secret, but as the woman I choose and cherish." Ebony had cried and laughed all at once. Yes, she had whispered 1,000 times, yes. Now, she stood in front of the mirror in a grand room of the mansion, wrapped in a silk wrapper the color of the rising sun. Her hair was braided with golden beads, her eyes lined with kohl, and her smile lit the entire room. As she stepped outside, a hush fell over the crowd. She walked slowly, each step full of grace. No longer a girl who hid her face. No longer the one they mocked. She was a woman now, strong, kind, and worthy of love. At the front, Obololiwa waited, dressed in royal blue with silver embroidery. When he saw her, his eyes softened with tears he didn't try to hide. The elder gave the blessing, his voice firm and warm. "Today, we honor a union built not on riches, but on truth." When they were pronounced husband and wife again, the cheers shook the trees. Children danced. Drummers played. Old women ululated until their voices cracked with joy. Ebony sat beside Obololiwa, holding his hand as people came forward with gifts, yams, goats, cloth, and even poems. But not everyone came with joy in their heart. At the edge of the gathering, Mofola and Remy stood, watching. Their faces were pale, eyes filled with a mix of regret and disbelief. Ebony saw them. And for a moment, her heart clenched. Memories of hunger, of harsh words, of lonely nights flashed before her. But she stood up anyway. She walked toward them. The crowd quieted. When she reached them, she looked at Mofola first. "You raised me with pain," she said softly, "but today I carry no anger." Mofola blinked fast, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then Ebony turned to Remy. "You took my name, my food, my peace. But I forgive you. Not because you asked, but because I'm free now." Remy's lips trembled. For once, she had nothing cruel to say. Ebony smiled gently. "I hope one day, you find peace too." Then she turned and walked away, lighter than ever before. Obololiwa stood to greet her, pulling her close. "You didn't have to say that," he said. "I did," she replied. "Because I don't want to carry the past anymore." That night, as the stars blinked above and laughter echoed across the compound, Ebony sat beside the man who had once lived in silence. She looked at him and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." He looked back, eyes shining. "Thank you for seeing me." And so the orphan girl, once thrown away like an old cloth, now lived as a queen in the heart of a man who truly loved her. Not because of who she used to be, but because of who she had become.